Welcome to the second part of Before You Play The Past Within. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I left you a link to the first essay on the topic in the description and the video card. Here's nowhere, and today I'll be forecasting. That is sharing expectations and theories concerning the upcoming Rusty Lake game about everyone's favorite Albert Vanderboom. Not everything I'll be telling you is to turn out the reality. Despite the majority of info being based in one way or another on the dev's own words, the development itself, that I talk about in the next video, just wasn't the easiest. Here's some historical background. 2021 wasn't the first year without a single new Rusty Lake title. The first one was 2019. Looking back at all the projects released in 2020, including some unexpected, that stagnation looks understandable and excusable. But further back in 2019 it was worrying, and even the smallest pieces of information were greedily absorbed by the fans. At the time, the devs openly worked on the White Door, a build of which was brought to the convention of Gamescom 2019. But that wasn't all. There was also a very early build of a new Albert's game. Its first teaser was published earlier that spring. One of the convention visitors shared his impressions about both games on Reddit. Later on, both his profile and the post were deleted, but the internet remembers. So here's the quote. There was also a small demo of a game featuring Albert, simply called Albert on the tablet's home screen. There is a table in a room, with a weird mechanical cube on it, all covered with tubes and gears. Inside the cube stands Albert next to another table. The goal is to fix the tubes and gears, to get a small cube from the outside into the inside. You can rotate the cube and zoom in on stuff, and you have to actually drag the items from the inventory. The cube lands on the table inside the cube, and Albert looks at you. Then the game zooms into it and restarts. When talking to the other guy from Rusty Lake, I don't know if it was Martin. He told me that implies that we are now looking at this new cube. And we go deeper and deeper, you know. He also told that the game will show what made Albert the killer we know and love. Apparently, the bees weren't enough. End of quote. This text clearly describes the early concept we know from the first devlog, featuring a 3D cube with a peephole we can look through to see 2D insides. Two mostly peculiar ideas were spoken here. One of them to deepen Albert's origin story. Rusty Lake Roots, despite the genius plot, covered his story very briefly indeed, leaving a bunch of questions. Who is that avian corrupted soul, and what does it want? Also, some questions we didn't even know existed. The second idea is a sequence of memory cubes, one placed inside another. That was well reflected in the logo, both the first version, spotted on the new year 2019, and the second one that accompanied the first trailer. It's also possible that the first teaser shows exactly the inside of such cube, that turns 3D after going deeper into it, and then offers to look into the next cube like that. That looks a lot like Inception movie, where people fall asleep inside a dream, entering the next level of dreaming, where they also fall asleep. We also saw something along these lines in Paradox, with the only difference that all the memory layers were identical, reminding a recursion. The two ideas combined, and we get Inception-like memories telling Albert's story backwards. The potential was huge. Every next cube, and we had a lot of them on the published concept art, could belong to a different Vanderboom. Not just letting them return to our screens, but also making each of them a protagonist for a day. But unfortunately, that's nothing but wet dreams, since the concept of a peephole box didn't work out. It was decided to make a multiplayer game, to split the 2D and 3D parts between two players, to throw away a ton of old progress, and to invent gameplay from scratch. By adding difficulties in learning a previously unfamiliar game engine, we get not a handful of levels, but only two. The first one features a computer of the White Door Mental Institute in the conditional future, with Albert's funeral in the conditional past inside it. And the second one is about a cubic tombstone with the content unknown. A clockwork cube from Gamescom 2019 is not expected. We don't even know for sure how it looked. Speaking of those actually expected, probably we're still getting a small Inception, but not for sure. The area around the tomb cube looks nothing like a room in Vanderboom's house. Plus, the demo published on Steam, and not with the cube like before, but with the reality deconstruction of some kind. The next insight about the upcoming plot took place on the new year 2021, alongside the game title reveal. Back then, the unexpected happened. Albert spoke to us directly, skipping the fourth wall. "Despite your hand in my demise, I'd like to wish you a happy new year on behalf of myself, my daughter Rose, and the Rusty Lake team. I hope you are prepared to rectify your previous error in the coming year. Because remember, the past is never dead. Many happy returns, Albert." It's not very clear if Albert is really aware of himself being a game character, but what is clear, in the very least, he will try to resurrect himself, and maybe even succeed. Thinking about it, the story isn't entirely new. We saw that both in Seasons and Roots. In the former, Laura, in order to be resurrected, as it seems to me, in her old body, was changing the memory cubes from inside. The details are in my essay in the video card. While in Roots, William, for decades, was orchestrating a sacrificial ritual in order to be reborn in a new body this time. But which of these ways will Albert pick, if any? Actually, it's not that easy to say. On one hand, yes, memory cubes are involved here too. Let's suppose that on the computer level in the future we play as Albert's soul. There's one outside the cube on the recent logo, just as in the past in the release date trailer. It's natural to assume that the same soul both times, and it's not Rose, since Rose is alive and we see them together. Meanwhile, in the Steam demo, the computer is writing about establishing connection with the person in the past. But actually, Rose is inside the machine. It's seen in the ending, it's seen on the final logo, and the devs speak of it in their interview to Edge magazine. The two locations are naturally part of the same world. Both players are viewing the same cube, just from an inside or outside perspective. The trailer even makes it seem that the peephole idea wasn't completely rejected after all, and the room's door inside is connected to an outside lens. So unlike Laura, Albert doesn't change that inside himself, and instead asks Rose to help him with some kind of experiment. Communication across time, by the way, isn't new either. Laura called herself from the future already in Seasons, and Mr. Owl gave Dale a watching birthday also from the future. And in the meal we may see things in that way and in Paradox. And here's the question: will Rose further deepen into the past in order to prevent Albert's death? Or will she prepare a rebirth ritual, like the one she was already helping William with at the time, gathering an alchemical cocktail of other people's body parts? After all, the devs seemingly imply something like that. First, they riddle us bone, flesh and blood in the sample puzzle, that's to explain how the game will work. Then they show us an ear, a tooth and more blood in the secret ending of the demo. And finally, they directly ask us on Instagram what to serve for a dinner: teeth, a nose, or an ear again. Actually, both ways of resurrection have their problems. If Rose is to change the past so Albert doesn't die, then William's plan that directly depends on it is effectively ruined. The ritual will lack Albert's brain. Meanwhile, Rose raising reborn William is canon after all. The only way around it is timeline branching, which isn't confirmed in stone yet. And also, the final result seems questionable. On the other hand, in order to repeat William's ritual, 10 pieces of different family members are required. Rose has 5 available at most. Also, it needs a tree, grown from a seed somehow taken from the former corpse of the person being reborn, and a woman to carry said person as her own child. Rose, in any case, is already occupied, and we know nothing about her giving birth to a second child. For now, I bet on Albert finding a third way of his own. At the same time, the probability of him being reborn as someone else is still pretty high. As who is an interesting question. Unfortunately, we have just a single candidate, and even he is controversial. So the only person fitting the dates and images is, at drumroll, Detective Dale Vandermeer. He was born after Albert's death, and just as Albert himself is associated to deers. At some point, it even seemed that the insect depicted on a drawing next to the computer was Dale's Rorschach test from Paradox, where he saw a moth, a symbol of his upcoming enlightenment. However, later on, it actually turned out to be, like those, leaving Albert's horrible scars. And the rebirth as Dale is controversial on its own. Firstly, that would render the world of Rusty Lake too small, making everyone secretly related either by blood or by samsara. And secondly, many think that such douchebag like Albert, the devil himself, have no slightest right to be associated with the overall protagonist of the series, destined to ascend above the entire world. In conclusion, I'll say the following: it doesn't matter what we get in the end. What's important, I'm sure the game will be unusual and exciting, no matter the side you choose to play. It's irrelevant whether I guessed at least something in this video or missed on every point. The answers we are about to get, and the theories built on them, will once again become a revelation worthy of deep dive. Let's theorize together. Please subscribe to my channel, write your guesses in the comments below, and if you want to discuss the games with me directly, just make a post on the Rusty Lake subreddit or look for me on the official Rusty Lake Discord server. The links are in the description below. Here was Now Here. Have a nice game, and remember, question everything in Rusty Lake.